Hi guys and welcome back. So today I'm going to be working on painting this fantasy forest setting, which is a new thing for me. I've made this goal for myself to do more environments and settings so I can tell more of a story through the paintings that I'm doing. And this I think is the first step where I'm doing something that's a little bit more involved and it's going to take a little bit more learning. But beyond that, I do have a couple quick announcements. The first one is that I am officially streaming over on Twitch. I stream 3 times a week, and I do completely new and different content than you see over here on YouTube. So if you want to see new stuff and you want to hang out with me in live time, you can follow the link that'll take you over to my Twitch page where you can become a follower or a subscriber, which is another great way to help support me and everything else that I do, and honestly, this channel as well. And also, the last little announcement is this painting, which I'm working on today. Of course, the painting itself will be available at my art shop, but I also will have limited edition prints of her. She will only be available for the first 50 prints. They'll all be hand signed as well as numbered, and they'll come with a certificate of authenticity. But yeah, if you want to own a print of her, make sure to snap it up before she gets taken. But that is it with the announcement, so let's go ahead and jump into actual painting. Okay, so first things first, as always, I'll always say this, but I started off with looking at references of forests and how they look and what kind of things I wanted to bring into mine. So some of the things that I noticed of the types of forests that I was looking at is that when you have the trees that are closer, they tend to be darker, and the ones that are farther away start to get lighter. And I also found that the gaps between the trees in the distance tended to be very light, where there's a lot of light out there, and then you have the trees, and as it gets closer, it would feel a little bit darker and more closed in. And I think there were several things that I wanted to kind of harness from that. So first off, I did want to have that where I had the lightest areas of the forest itself to be in the far off distance between the trees. And I wanted to make sure that the trees that were closest to the viewer were the darkest and had the most contrast. And that's kind of something that ties into atmospheric effect, and that's where as things get farther away, they start getting less saturated and a little bit bluer. And you'll notice this with mountains specifically. If you happen to live in an area where you can see mountains, as they start to get farther and farther away, you'll see that effect, and it's actually really interesting. And I think I forgot to mention, it also has lower contrast, so that's a big thing to remember, is that as things are closer, you can see darker darks and lighter lights, and as they get farther away, it becomes a little bit closer together. The lights are closer to the darks, and everything just comes back together. So that was something that I was really making sure that I would get in this painting to give it space and dimension. So that's something that I think is key to me figuring out how to do successful environments. I need to make sure that I'm figuring out techniques to give it depth, to make things that are far away look far away. And that is one of the big things. So for the trees that were closer, one, I made them darker. I also had the shadows a little bit more rich and dark. And then as the trees get farther away, as I'm building up on it, they do have shadows, but they're closer to that local color of the tree. Overall, they're a little bit more harmonious. Not harmonious, but they're overall closer in their colors, in their values as well. And the trees ended up being a process of a lot of different layers to slowly guide it into the direction that I wanted, which is usually how I work. So I wasn't surprised by that, but I did want to make sure that the trees still had a very green color to them. I wanted it to feel fantastical, and while that, I think, in the end looks pretty slight, it's not jarring that it's crazy colors, but I think that because the trees are a little bit greener, or as they get farther away, they're more blue, it has a little bit more of that mystical feel to it. And beyond that, it also has the benefit of having more of a cohesive color palette with everything else that's happening in this forest in the background. So I did make sure that it was much more on the green side rather than a brown tree. And I also made sure that I was incorporating the greens that I would be using in the grass on the trees. And like I said, where the closer ones, those were more green. And as I got farther away, those trees, I started picking more of the color that I used to paint that in between, the space, the light that's coming through. It's kind of like this, well, it actually is the M-gram cobalt teal color. That's the main one that I used for that. So as the trees got farther away, I started using that paint more and And that really helped give a little bit more depth to the trees. It brought it back closer to that background layer, that really light that's coming through. And then the other trees that are closer, they're more green, so they pop out more. And that paint that I used for that background light, the M-Gram Cobalt Teal, because it's just a little bit more opaque than most of my watercolors, I actually don't usually like that. I love this paint color. I use it all the time, but I don't like that aspect of it. But when I was using it in this particular application, it actually came in a little bit handy because as I was building it up, I layered it on top of some of those trees that were farther in the background. And because it was just a little bit opaque, it smoked out the line work that I had on some of those trees, which helped, again, it really helped it look a little bit hazier and farther away. And anything like that can build up that depth that I wanted to create in this piece would be really nice and really helpful. So I liked that feature actually came in handy this time. And I loved painting her hair. This is the part that I was really looking forward to because ever since I started with the color comps, her hair was that point where I really loved the piece. I felt like it really made it. And the reason for that is because the background is so predominantly greens and blues, having this really nice, rich, purpley pink color, it pops off really well against that green, and it has this warmth to it that brings a lot of attention to it and to the character. But because it's a little bit on the cooler side of the pink color, it still feels like it belongs with these colors. It's not so jarring where it looks like it couldn't exist in the same environment. Because it's cooler, I think it blends really nicely while still having that contrast and that extra emphasis in this piece. I also think it adds interest to it where if I didn't have this strong, different color, I think it would get really monotonous in this painting where it's just greens and blues kind of repeating themselves. So having that pink, it really breaks up the piece. Also, since it's tied out throughout this painting, it does break up some other areas in this piece as well. And one of my favorite parts about painting this hair is where I was able to add more blue to it so that it became more of this purple pink color, much more purple I should say, as it got farther away. So it mimicked that same effect that I had on the trees as well. If I had it the same flat red pink color throughout the entire painting, as it got farther away, it would look really flat and it would flatten this whole piece. But because I was able to go in there with that blue color and tone down specifically the areas of hair that's wrapped around that background tree that's behind this little grassy hill, that I think really cements the space that's happening in this painting. And I love details like that where once I can tweak it a little bit like that, it suddenly gives it a little bit more reality to it. I liked it. That was probably my favorite part to paint, was painting that darker, well, I don't think it was really darker, just the bluer areas of her hair. And I just, as a final step, I go back over the elements that are black. Originally, I had used a completely waterproof matte black ink, which worked great. But since a couple, again, of my paints are a little bit opaque, like that cobalt teal, as well as, I think I have another blue that has a similar effect to that. You can see where I had painted over the black, and you can see some of that pigment coming through. So I just did a little bit of a touch-up of resealing that back to a very black color. I also went in with actually a mixture of gouache as well as some of my white gel pen to add these little like fairy lights or little glowing dots in the background like I always do. But I think in this particular instance with the forest, I think it really actually had a little bit more of a purpose than it normally does. But that detail, I had a lot of fun with being able to give a little bit more of a magical feeling to the extra background, where as it got farther away, I added more and more dots, and then less as it got closer because we're looking through more space, so there would be more glowing dots that you would see. And I always forget to mention this, but at the end of every painting of all of my watercolor paintings, I always seal the painting with a final fixative that has a UV protectant in it. And the reason for that is that watercolors can fade with light. Now, with each pigment, they have not a setting, what is it called? A rating on light fastness. And I always make sure that I get the highest light fastness available, period. I don't get anything that's below that, but it still has the risk of fading out with light. So I make sure that I seal it with that, and that helps it be a little bit more resistant to sunlight, so when you display it, it can preserve the colors for a lot longer, if not indefinitely. It also helps so that it stays preserved better. It just holds in everything that I've already put down, and since I like to use several different mediums, sometimes pastels or my white gel pen or gouache, it just finishes it all off, so it's a lot safer and finished up. But yeah, I will again, like I said, have a link down to, well, a link down in the description that'll take you over to the specific spray that I use. I'll also have links to all the other tools that I use to create this painting. I want to give a huge thank you to all of my patrons who help support me and this channel over on Patreon. If you'd like to become a patron and help support everything that I do and all of the artwork, there is a link down in the description that'll take you over there. You can check out the exclusive things that I have listed over on my Patreon that you get access to. But I also have a link that'll take you over to my art shop where you can get this original painting or one of the limited edition numbered prints. There will be a link down in the description. Again, they'll take you right over there. But thank you guys so much for watching. I will be back next Saturday with another video. Also, I'll be streaming all week, so hopefully I'll be able to see some of you there. But that's it. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.